Well, welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us as we present our second grant outcomes of the 2023 period. We're grateful, as always, that you scheduled us in and made time for this discussion. Before we get started, I would love to take a minute to recognize the MHCH Foundation. Without their generous funding to the Global Rural Virtual Collaboration Learning Grant, we wouldn't be able to allow the partnerships and the extended growth that we are doing through this program. So we are very grateful that they support this. If you're not familiar with the Global Rural Nursing Virtual Collaboration Learning Grant, MHCH provides funding programs that promote virtual collaboration, learning, and global connections. The grant opportunity is designed to foster partnerships between international nursing students and educators to collaborate on rural community projects. As you can see on the screen, the grant application period will open on March 1st. We are going to be hosting a pre-application webinar on February 21st, both at 9 a.m. and again at 3 p.m. And that's just going to help people learn a little bit more about the grant, the process, build best practices around building a compelling application, understanding how funding is distributed, and we're also going to help identify international partners if you don't have someone already. Next week on January 25th at 8 a.m., we are also going to be hosting our next project, which is the Global Nursing Education Health Literacy Project. I'm sorry, I am getting a bunch of feedback. I don't know if anybody else is. Okay. Well, if anyone else can hear it, I do apologize. For housekeeping, just note that we are going to be hosting Q&A until the end. At that time, we will open up chat and Q&A feature. Okay, somebody else is getting it as well. I'm going to try one thing really quick and see if this helps. Okay. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate there is a lot of extras. Okay, I think that we might have, okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate everybody letting me know, and I do apologize. If it was a little cumbersome before, just know that we talked a little bit about the grant recognizing MHCH Foundation for their efforts. If you visit our website at grnen.org and you go to the grants page, you can find the information we just shared. I don't want to repeat myself if you did hear me, but there's information on there about the application, the webinars, and the pre-application session. For a little bit of housekeeping, we are going to hold everything till the end, but please do feel free to share any questions during the course of the presentation. We will hold that in order to keep the flow moving. And now I would love to introduce you to our wonderful presenters. Jessica Smith is an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Arlington College of Nursing and Health Innovation. She received her PhD in nursing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 2016. She completed a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at Center for Health Outcomes and Policy Research at the University of Pennsylvania. Her areas of interest include understanding the needs of the acute rural nurse workforce to deliver safer patient care and how work environments and processes influence nurse well-being. Along with Jessica, we have Dr. Sharon Laver. She is a registered nurse with extensive experience in community-based nursing, health service management, and organizational development. Her experience extends from major metropolitan hospitals to rural and remote Australian health services and has included major state-level project work. Her PhD focused on professional becoming among newly graduated nurses in regional Australia. Sharon's area of interest include transitions in practice and workforce resilience, and sustainability in rural health and regional areas. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters so they can share their presentation with you too.
Oh, I think your microphone's off.
Sorry about that. too many buttons to click. Thank you, Stacey, for that very warm introduction. Jessica and I worked on our project across the, it feels like 15 or 18 months now. We were looking at rural nursing opportunities, and it was a United States-Australian collaboration with undergraduate nursing students. And I'd like to extend my thanks to the people who have joined us today. I'll say today because for me it's first thing in the morning. For other people it will be late afternoon or into the evening. Firstly, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country, which is something we do in Australia before as we launch into formal meetings. So in making that acknowledgement, I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and recognise the various nation states from where we are all meeting today. I'd like to extend that respect to First Nations peoples who may be in the room with us. For a little bit of context, you can see on the slide a map or a diagram, a stylized map of New South Wales and of Texas. And you'll see that, in fact, New South Wales is marginally larger than Texas. I'll leave you to read that level of detail and give you an idea of what you're going to hear and see from Jessica and I today. We will be presenting the overall goals of our project, but more importantly, we'll be presenting to you some of the words from our student participants in Australia and from the United States, and some of the ways we went about introducing the students to this international collaboration. One of the things, we posted some things to the discussion board to encourage students to start to come together with that idea around collaborating. And I posted a number of things where I was able to identify a collaboration between the United States broadly and Australia. And when we kicked off, it was around the time that the AUKUS submarine deal had been signed. That was between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States to build particular types of submarines. So my challenge or my statement to the students there at the bottom, imagine where our collaboration could lead in the coming years. As emerging registered nurses, you could be leading significant projects that will improve the health of our respective communities and possibly rural communities in other countries. An important thing, I think, for us as nurses to recognise that there are really no boundaries to what we could be doing. Thanks, Jessica.
And following up on that, we'd like to share a quote from a student from the discussion board. And they recognized, even at the early stage of the project, that collaborations allow for individuals, communities to really come together and brainstorm ideas, see things from other perspectives, especially when there's different countries and cultures working together. The goals for our project were, we had 3 of them. And so the first was for both countries to develop an understanding, a deeper understanding of health service systems and needs for rural communities, to explore pathways to rural nursing as a career option in both countries, as well as to compare rural nursing trends in both countries, as including the impact on nursing shortages. So we planned our project once we heard about the grant call, we rapidly began planning. And as part of this, we planned it as a research project requiring ethics approval. And so we planned to have 2 rounds of recruitment. We ended up doing 1, and we'll cover more about that later. we prepared for our research, as I said, by getting everything ready for a international virtual collaboration, which was going to include collecting the participant data, involving recording and transcribing and all of that to develop themes from the project. One important thing we did was on our recruiting, we wanted to really capture students' attention, and near the end of the project, we asked students, what was it that really brought you to participate? And the key words they said that really caught their attention were global project, Australia, rural. And so those were things that really stood out as unique to the students. We had meetings for both of our countries, like students from the US and Sharon and I met, and then students from Australia and Sharon and I met. So Sharon and I met with each and every student group, which enhanced our ability to connect with the students and make this collaboration deeper and meaningful. We also did discussion board posts, and students posted, we would post prompts and then they'd respond, and they would have interesting conversation even in between meetings, such as our one respondent, never heard of the collaboration between the US and Australia to record Neil Armstrong stepping out onto the moon. That's something Sharon can probably speak more about too.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Where I live in Bathurst is west of Sydney, and even further west again, about a 2-hour drive, is a place called Parkes that has a satellite dish. We call it the dish. And it was at that particular site, which at the time was in the middle of a sheep paddock, where CSIRO scientists and scientists from NASA worked together to record the first lunar mission from NASA, and it was because of the things around being in the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, and when the moon was visible. So that was something that even for our local students was, oh, okay. So this was a real thing. I'll hand back to you, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you. And so another notable thing about our processes is we each had a site visit in both of our countries, and we'll talk about the location of the site visit, more about that in the coming slides, but that was something, a good outcome of our project. Okay, so for our meetings, we had an idea set out where we wanted to have them semi-structured, and we wanted to inspire interest and curiosity and respect in the learning process. And some of the ways we did this, we began and we asked them as an icebreaker we shared pictures and had them guess, like, where is it? Is it in the US or is it in Australia? And so you can see on the top left is a courthouse, Wise County Courthouse from Texas, and at the right is the Bathurst Courthouse Dome. And the students really got to think about it, how things are common, like we both have these county structures, and also how they're different. And so they really got a chance to start off the project getting to know one another. And the bottom two pictures show how desolate or rural or remote the area is in Australia that we were discussing. As noted by the student quote, they had never heard of Nullarbor before the conversation last week, and that it was truly desolate, but that they were, notably, they were looking forward to more conversations. So our participants were really engaged and interested.
Particularly to learn about one another's environments.
Oh, yeah.
And countries. Yeah. So our site visits were part of the setup of our project, and we're really grateful to those the sites that we were able to visit. So in Australia, we took a trip to a multi-purpose service at a small community called Coolar. Now, a multi-purpose service is a particular type of publicly funded health service in Australia that receives money from our federal government and our state government, and also through people accessing services with private health insurance. They're generally very small services that offer residential aged care. They can offer palliative care, they offer limited emergency services, and there's often community services based within those multi-purpose services. So our road trip, it took us 3 hours to drive to Coolar from Bathurst. And you can see on the slide, the first photograph there on the left of Lake Windermere, which is just outside of Mudgee, which was our first stop, or our only stop really, for morning tea on our way to Coolar. And I think that was around 7:30 in the morning. And the lake itself is a very common place for people to undertake their outdoor leisure activities. The second slide is when we arrived at Coolar, and the students were quite enamoured with the idea of the helipad right on the front lawn of the service. And the reason for that is that we will have helicopters used to transport people either to Sydney or other regional health services in emergency situations where they really are critically ill or critically injured, perhaps through motor vehicle accidents or mining accidents or industrial accidents, farming accidents. The third photograph there is of the nurses' station, which I would suggest is fairly typical of any nurses' station where there are inpatients or in emergency departments. And you can see there a whole lot of files with policies and procedures and meeting minutes. And you can see also the old, in the bottom here, the old storage for radiology films. Of course, the inevitable printer, photocopier, and other resources that the nurses may be requiring. What you can't see in that particular photograph, and that the students noted, was a security camera video within that area to alert nurses to anything that's happening on the site, so that after I think it was around 5 or 6 p.m, the building is locked down, and this video camera can, these video cameras alert the nurses to anyone who might be outside the building requiring assistance or any other movements that are unusual. The other things that we noted when we were at Coolar was, well, we took obviously a photograph of the main street, the median strip down the middle, and the beautiful trees and shade. But we found a meat vending machine outside the butcher shop, which we had never seen nor heard of previously, but it provides an opportunity for people who can't get to the shops during normal business hours to be able to purchase fresh meat for their evening meals, mostly for their evening meals. So that was something that really took us by surprise. While we were in Coolar, we came to learn of some things that were happening in the community that were potentially going to be divisive. So you can see in this photograph across the ridge line here, there's a plan to put up a whole lot of wind turbines for electricity generation. And that's proving somewhat divisive to the community. But interestingly, the health service manager, who was also a registered nurse, highlighted some serious concerns to us in relation to that project going ahead. And they were in relation to being able to provide health services to the workers and the risk of industrial accidents, the influx of people to the community, when in fact, at the time we were there were issues around recruiting staff to the facility, and the more broader community infrastructure, and the fact that in some instances the roads weren't suitable for people to access to provide health services to people in those areas. So there were a whole lot of things that came out of our site visit that was more than looking at the facility saying, oh, isn't this lovely? And what a beautiful place to work.
Right. So our visit was at Graham Regional Medical Center. And to place this into context, in Texas, we have a map up here on the left, and where the highlight is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Where Arlington is located is where the highlight is, but you can see how the roads are, and it's densely populated. There's a lot of activity there. If you go northwest a little bit, which is about 2 hours away, is Graham. And that is where we traveled to Graham Regional Medical Center. And they have a range of services, emergency room, emergency medical services, cardiac pulmonary rehab, surgery services, physical occupational therapy. And we got to take a tour of the facility with the students. And we got to meet the CNO and some other nursing staff and talk about, what is it like to work as a rural nurse and what are some of the challenges and opportunities. And we also had the students do a survey of the community where they just drove around in their car a little bit, maybe around the hospital and the community, to see visually what did they notice and how might that relate to the health of the population. And one of the quotes that I just wanted to share was, student found it educational and eye-opening, and they really found it beneficial to go for the visit to learn. Now we'd like to talk about the similarities and differences between the site visits. So one overarching similarity is that we both of our sites indicated some level of nurse short staffing, so that there was a need for nurses that had to be filled somehow. And there were different ways of managing it. So at Kula, they discussed a lack of permanent staff, and there was a mix of local and agency nurses, ENs, which I believe is equivalent to our registered nurse, and AINs, which is, I believe, equivalent, and correctly, Sharon, to your LVN. Is that right? Like a license?
Yeah, I think so. So our registered nurses are bachelor or baccalaureate prepared.
Okay.
Enrolled nurses sit at a diploma level.
Okay.
And our assistants in nursing have completed a vocational education program, but not to that same level.
Yeah, and so they discussed a different mix of nurses from Graham, and RNs were either agency or around the district, whereas at Graham, there was a large focus on RNs solely for what they were looking at to address the short staffing, which was an interesting comparison. The services available at Kula, they had a range of services, but one notable thing is that they may have had some things just once a week. For example, although they had nurses on site 24/7, they might have had just a physiotherapist once a week, child and family nurse once a week, podiatrist once a month. So they have these services scheduled on days, which makes the nurse need to be really proficient to handle anyone that comes in anytime for anything, and that can be a practice challenge. So at Graham Regional Medical Center, we wanted to share a quote from one of the students who was fascinated with the fact that they had a lot of physical therapists, and also that they had a lot of like schedule procedures and knees and hips things that came in like that, and it just looked really busy. And I recall that too when we went in to visit, and there were a lot of staff and patients, and so that was an interesting difference in comparison to kind of a business model in the US as compared to like a needs or patient-centered model, government funded in Australia. So, and the students talked about that.
They certainly did, and that was for the students quite a stark difference. That the idea that in cooler and in rural health services more broadly across Australia, we talk about the registered nurses being specialist generalists, where you have to have a knowledge about a whole lot of things in terms of health and health services and diseases and emergency management and the things that are going on in the community that impact on people's health and why some things may be happening, or that really foundational knowledge around the seasons even, and at particular times of year where there may be spikes in things like asthma. So the students highlighted those things as part of our shared international meetings. And that difference between the publicly funded service compared to Graham Regional Medical Centre, where there appears to be that emphasis on business generating an income to maintain the service where it is. Quite an interesting discussion that we had there.
So one of the things we were really pleased about is the student growth, because one of our outcomes was really how did our collaboration, how did us coming together influence or change or advance the students' thinking in both countries. So relating back to the conversations we had about the differences in the funding for Australian and US healthcare, the Australian student really noticed the big takeaway. There's really a lot of differences that you don't appreciate at face value. And there's differences between the nurses and their roles and how they're educated in the different countries. So there's really a lot more to look at in the nursing part of it, in addition to just how the overall healthcare system is funded. And then about the healthcare systems, there's states in Australia and there's states in the US, and there's probably differences. There is differences because of the way our governments are structured at the federal level and state level, and how much power each of the US states had, for example, during COVID, and how their governors were ordering different things. And there was a lot of different conversation about that. And from the US, a student noted that they really saw similarities across the world that they weren't expecting. They came into it curious and interested, but wondering kind of, what am I going to have in common with Australia? And then by the end of the project, she was seeing, okay, we're having some of the same problems. We have short staffing, but we have different ways of managing problems. We have different insurance and healthcare funding structures. And for this student, it really enhanced their critical thinking and the information sharing, just coming together and being able to share with each other and talk deeply about these issues was really beneficial.
Well, one of the discussions that we had, which was a little bit unexpected from Jessica and I, but certainly highlighted the importance of the cultural exchange, was when the students were talking about their site visits and the things they observed in the community. Particularly, I talked a little bit about some of the things that happened or that we learned about from an Australian perspective. But when we were talking with our participants from the United States, they highlighted that in some of the communities they passed through, there were, quite a number of churches or places of worship, and in some of those places, consumption of alcohol in those faiths was not appropriate or was not allowed. But they also observed that there might be 5 or 6 liquor outlets in the community. So we had the opportunity to really think critically and discuss what that meant from a healthcare perspective, and then from a nursing perspective in terms of perhaps the health education, health promotion that may or may not be possible in those communities. So it was a really a valuable deep dive, I think, for the students to really move their thinking from how do I manage somebody who has congestive cardiac failure or needs rehabilitation on their post-surgery. So they were real benefits, I think, and I think that's what this particular student was talking about when they were referring to enhancing their critical thinking. In terms of outcomes from our project, I mentioned earlier that I posted some things on the discussion board that highlight collaboration. I also had the opportunity to post some links to things in Australia that may have been useful to the students, that particularly related to rural and remote nursing and rural and remote health service delivery. So CRANA, the Council of Remote Area Nurses of Australia, which has now evolved to be known as CRANA Plus, produce a series of podcasts from rural health practitioners. And one of the things the student identified was that no day is the same as the last, that people have to be quick on their feet to solve the problem that has presented at a clinic or at a health service. I also posted some links to the Royal Flying Doctor Service, which, as has been noted, started in 1928. It was started by Reverend John Flynn in Central Australia. And it was about his goal, or his aim was to bring health services to people in those very remote areas, and was able to do that using aeroplanes and, at the time, pedal radios for communication. And also the fact that that nurses developed body charts to use to map pain for people. So there were some really interesting things came out of that for the students. But of key importance is the participants' post saying, I think each one of us will learn something from our collaboration that we will take with us to our careers. And a US participant said, I think there's a lot of offshoots that can come from this. I've posted, or I've put onto this slide just a Google search of those two organisations, so Krana Plus, and you'll see here employment pages for rural and remote area work that our participants could go to explore employment opportunities and to really look at what's required to achieve employment in those areas from an educational perspective, from an experience perspective, from a clinical perspective. And the same thing here with the Royal Flying Doctor Service, the careers that are available across the country. And of course, they also offer student placements. You can see on this map, Sydney, Australia. So that's our capital city, major international airport. Bathurst is where I am located and where the campus I work on. You can see there the 3/4 hour drive to Coolah, which is where our site visit was. In fact, it took longer because we hadn't been there before, and there was a need to stop and get some refreshments because, in fact, we left at 6 in the morning to be there by 9:30. Now, the participant whose words are on this slide saying, I appreciate the support and the research project. I loved every minute of being able to learn more about nursing. I'm excited to use my knowledge of rural nursing in Broken Hill, which is way out to the left-hand side of the map. Now, that note came from the student as she completed her Bachelor of Nursing. And to give you some sort of context, in the map, on the map of Texas, it would be like moving from Beaumont on the east coast to El Paso in the far west of Texas. So it's quite a significant shift for that particular student, because the other thing I will share with you is that she grew up in Sydney. So she's moving from a major metropolitan area, moved to a regional area to complete her degree, and now is moving to the very far west of New South Wales, where services are limited and access to services is a significant issue.
Yes, that is quite a great outcome to have a student participate in this project and then choose to participate in a very remote area. So that is wonderful. Some of the other feedback we got from Australian participants that they really enjoyed and got a lot out of the discussions. And then the other quote here from a US student, which is they thought it was a great experience and that honestly, she thought it was a little too short. And we have meetings over a 3-month time period. So this longitudinal element, meeting with students over time, it really made a difference to their learning. And we got to go from surface level, learning where people live to really deep cultural issues and differences and healthcare system differences. And the student references that here by saying, the one time we talked about healthcare and religion, it was just, it ties into the community health. So it could be an answer to some of these almost unanswered questions is why are some things a big healthcare need? So.
And it for Jessica and I, well, for me, I'll speak for myself, thinking, oh, the United States, Australia, both first world, Western countries, there's not going to be a lot of differences. But in fact, we uncovered some really important things in relation to health and health services and health care for people. We'd like to just present some insights that we have from our project for future projects. And we'll present them. There's 4 from the perspective of project leads and 1 from one key point from the perspective of students. And I'd like to highlight the relationship building between project leads. That was a really important part of preparing the project and working together to problem solve and support one another as we navigated our own organisational processes. And out of that, we believe we built a strong working relationship, but more importantly, from the project perspective, it was a stronger project because we had taken the time to work together to navigate a whole lot of things that delayed us initially, but certainly made the project a lot stronger for the student experience. We also recognise that best fit is not always based in a classroom. That the opportunity for virtual collaboration through different types of technology were also really valuable learning opportunities for our students to think perhaps more broadly about health and nursing care, to consider the people that we are serving, and to really focus on and be that offer that person-centered approach to what we're doing. The cultural exchange that came out of the collaboration is something that we hadn't anticipated, but was certainly a prime part of what came out of the project from our perspectives and from the students to be able to say, I can see all these similarities and I can see all these differences, and who would have thought that they might have been similar and different all at the same time. And of course, navigating approvals from our universities to conduct an international research project. Jessica and I are early career researchers, so that was a challenge that, as I said earlier, was delayed us initially, but actually made our work much stronger and the project much stronger as well. An important insight from the students was in relation to the timing and their progress through their degrees. And you can see there 3 quotes from our participants. I asked a couple of students in my group if they were going to apply or why they didn't apply, and they just said they didn't think they would have time for it. So keep in mind, these are students in their final year and for some in their final semester of their degree. In Australia, I think 3rd year is taking its toll on some people. They've got lots of assessments due, they've got lots of workplace learning to do. I think just one thing that I've noticed that impacted us was just that the thing in placement, like I think, especially in 3rd year, we're so desperate to complete our placement. You're like probably going to prioritise your placement over this, participating in a project. So really, if we were to repeat the project, we'd really look very carefully at the point in the degree where we would be looking to recruit students. The other outcomes, Jessica and I have published in the Journal of Advanced Nursing, which is an international journal. And that particular publication we called Jumping Through Hoops, which we identified as a metaphor, which we did talk about in some of our meetings, for our experiences and building our resilience as international collaborators. We also put forward an abstract to the 26th International Philosophy of Nursing Conference, which was held in Sydney last year. And Jessica presented an exploration of what is different about rural health nursing. That particular presentation was well received as part of a, what do they call them? Lost the word. Concurrent session. And we're in the process of writing that up as for the Journal of Nursing Philosophy special issue as conference proceedings. We also have a couple of manuscripts in progress for the Journal of Qualitative Nursing and Nurse Education in Practice, both of which are international publications.
We'd like to acknowledge a spectrum of people who, without their support, this project would not have occurred. Our project participants, we want to thank them. They were open to learning. They were open to sharing their experiences and knowledge, questions, aspirations. They weren't afraid to ask questions and really get to know the issues in the other countries from people from those countries. We're also would like to acknowledge the photo contributions from project participants. We'd like to acknowledge both health services in both countries. Grand Regional Medical Center and Kula both took time to have a day that we could go and the students could talk to them, and they accommodated site visits, even given all of their other duties. We would really like to acknowledge Matson, Halverson, Christensen, and Hamilton Foundation for their generous philanthropy, which enabled us to even begin collaborating and meet. So that was very exciting. We would like to acknowledge also our respective universities and everyone in those universities who helped us make this project happen, and for encouraging international research and international collaborations. So with that, we want to thank everyone for attending, and I'll turn it over to Stacy for the next portion.
Thank you both so much for putting this together today. It was really wonderful to hear these experiences and to see the growth in your students. So thank you for sharing all of that. At this point, please feel free to use your chat or Q&A if you have a question or comment that you would like to share. One comment that I do have from a participant noted that this would be great to submit to the Rural Nurse Organization's journal. So if you haven't done so, maybe something to consider as you're looking towards future publication opportunities. Thank you, Melinda, for sharing that. Common and incredible collaboration to promote rural healthcare on an international level. Great work. Okay. I'll give everyone a couple of minutes just as a last quick reminder. We will be meeting again with another grant group on the 25th. And we will be having our pre-application session in February. So please be sure to check our website at grnen.org for updates and information on that. We are always putting documents out there. We are also always emailing. So if you don't have our email, if you're not on our email list, please email us at info@grnen.org. We will be posting this recording probably within the next day or so on the archives of our website. So if you would like to share this with any of your colleagues or peers, please feel free to do so. I have a comment here from Beth Merwin saying, thank you for your informative presentation. She's asking, are there follow-up or future collaboration plans? How does one promote sustainable international collaborations?
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to speak for us both, but I mean, I certainly enjoy working with Sharon. We meet almost every week. We are strong collaborators, and we're going to be talking about our next steps for what we plan to do next. So, anything to add, Sharon?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Elizabeth. And it is something that Jessica and I have considered and looked at, and we're both looking around our respective places to see whether there are things that we can continue to work on that sit with our particular interests. And there's a couple of things sort of not quite on the boil and not quite simmering, certainly at Charles Sturt University, that Jessica may be interested in becoming involved in. But the opportunity to work together and get to know one another, I think, has been the real key to the success of our collaboration. And as Jessica said, we're really grateful to the foundation for that opportunity. We also, how do we sustain international collaborations? We encouraged our participants to keep in touch with one another through the discussion boards, and I have a feeling that I can't verify this, I have nothing to base it on, but I have a feeling that some of them may have exchanged personal email addresses to keep in touch with one another beyond our project. And if nothing else, that's the start of generating some level of sustainability to continue to foster those networking opportunities. Has that answered your question, Elizabeth?
While we're giving her a minute, yes, it does.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you both. Another question for you. Is either of your universities considering adding this to your curriculum?
That's an interesting question. We haven't pursued the curricular piece as we are still working through the knowledge generation aspect, but that is something to consider. What do you think, Sharon?
Yeah, absolutely. It is something to consider. I guess the challenge in terms of curriculum is that they're built and they are in place for, well, here, they're accredited for 5 years. So introducing something like this to an already busy full curriculum would not be appreciated, I don't think, because it would mean some significant changes. And the other thing to consider in terms of introducing these types of projects to curricula is, or certainly at Charles Sturt, is that it needs to then be viable across 6 different cohorts of, or six different cohorts of students, and class sizes of up to 200 students studying across the country. So that's another challenge. And we would also then need to go back to our course accrediting body to ensure that they're happy with what we're proposing to do as well. So introducing this type of thing to curricula in Australia is a challenge. Has that answered your question?
Yes.
Great,
Perfect.
thank you. I
we
can
have-
see Sue Lin has suggested blending into a rural certificate program would be an amazing educational addition, and that's certainly something that I'm looking at in terms of our postgraduate opportunities. Thanks for that, Sue Lin. Go ahead, Stacey, sorry.
No, you are fine. I think that is all the questions that we have right now. If you,
Joan has put forward, once published, perhaps it could be part of a discussion board. I'm wondering, Joan, if you'd like to expand on that a little bit, and I'd welcome hearing your voice if you've got a microphone access. Okay.
well, Joan, I'm not sure if you're still on. If you are and you want to just share any further comment you might have on that, you can do that directly through email, or please feel free to post that on the discussion forum that we have to keep the conversation going. We always welcome and enjoy when our participants use that feature. If there are any last questions, we will go ahead and conclude our webinar today. Again, please look for the recording in the next few days, and we certainly hope to see you at a webinar in the future. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your day. Sorry, as we close up, Joan is saying we have a discussion board in the community health course and feel it would make a great read to stimulate conversation.
Thank you very much for that, Joan.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for taking your time this evening or this morning, wherever you may be dialing in from, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone. Thank you.